So tonight I'm going to make my famous pesto sauce, and it's going to be the most amazing pesto that you've ever had. The ingredients are very simple. The important thing is to get the right stuff, not try to be too fancy. To start out, we've got the basil. And this is organic basil, so it doesn't have to be washed. Don't wash the basil, because when you wash the basil, all of the basil flavor comes out. Instead of spaghetti, I like to make bucatini. Bucatini is, it's like thick spaghetti. You can make it with penne, you can make it with pretty much any kind of pasta that you like. I like either spaghetti or bucatini. Raw pine nuts, you find them at the grocery store in the produce section. A little bit of garlic, just 1 or 2 cloves. And this is key, pecorino. This is the best cheese ever made in the universe. It comes from Sardinia, from sheep's milk. It's made from sheep's milk, not cow's milk. And you could use Parmigiano Reggiano if you like, but it's not as good. Pecorino is the cheese you want to use for this, and some people call it Romano, but a lot of times when they call it Romano, it's not really Pecorino. So make sure that you get Pecorino. This is just from Publix, Italian Pecorino. Make sure it's imported from Italy. It's not some cheap American imitation. You want to grate it yourself. Comes in a block. Don't get the kind that's already grated. It's probably not legit. One other thing, a lemon. So that's important because when we make our pesto here, it's got a little tinge of lemon in it, which is a little trick that comes from the Amalfi Coast. One thing you're going to need is a food processor. Nothing real fancy. Unless you want to be old school about it and use a pestle and mortar. That's why they call it pesto, because the basil used to be made that way. Some people still do it. It's like a marble bowl with a thing that you mash it down. It takes a while. Completely up to you, but this is a heck of a lot easier. Simple food processor. Secondly, you need a big pot like this, not some cheesy little pot where you're trying to shove the spaghetti in and fit. A nice big pot full of water. The other thing you're going to need is a couple of cutting boards. At least 1, probably 2 would be nice. And actually, here it is. And one of these, a colander. Now, one of the most important mistakes that you shouldn't make is never put olive oil in the water. A lot of people in America like to do that. The problem with that is that the pasta sauce will never stick to the pasta. So I think people do that so the pasta won't stick to itself. No need, as long as you stir it really good, you're not going to have that problem. It's also very important to take some sea salt. This is a Lessie brand, not table salt, God forbid, but real salt that comes from the sea. And you put, about a tablespoon, maybe more, so that the water is salty like the sea. I like to put about 2 tablespoons in, so the water's nice and salty and it gives flavor to the pasta. All right, now, the first thing that you're going to put in this food processor is a nice clove of garlic. If it's a big one, you might only need 1. You don't want it to be too garlicky because it's not a garlic pesto, it's just pesto. But if they're about this size, I like to use 2 of them. Now we're making enough pesto here for about 4 people. The other thing that you're going to throw in there is a little bit of salt, maybe about a teaspoon or a tablespoon, and we're going to give that a little chop. It's a beautiful, beautiful Next, we're going to add the pine nuts. Now, how much pine nuts to use? Just the right amount. I usually use about 2/3 of this package. This is Weymouth Farms pine nuts, and its net weight is 3 ounces. I usually use about 2/3 of it. You can use a little less, a little more. Some people like to toast the pine nuts. I find that unnecessary. Now we're going to chop up these pine nuts in the food processor. Just a little bit, it doesn't really take a whole lot. And of course, beautiful, beautiful. So you can get this basil in the organic section of pretty much any grocery store has them, you know, wherever the produce is. And I get these are 2-ounce cartons, so I got 3 of them. I'm not going to use all 3. I'll definitely use 2 and probably use 2.5. That's enough for 4 people. 4 people, I use about not quite 2 pounds. Each one of these is a pound. I use about a carton and a half, so that comes to about 24 ounces. So the basil, you just want to pull these leaves off. You know, I can pull a few of them off at a time. You don't want to use the stems because there's not a whole lot of flavor in those stems. And you just, you know, put those aside and just pull the leaves off. Get your basil ready. And once you've grated the cheese, you earned yourself the right to sample the goods. Absolutely the best cheese in the universe. And last but not least, you got to have some good olive oil. It's an essential ingredient. And make sure when you get the olive oil that all of the olives come from Italy, or all of them come from Greece, or all of them come from Spain. But don't get the blended ones. A lot of the olive oils today in the grocery store, they're just a mix of a whole bunch of different olives. I prefer the ones from Italy, so just be sure of that, and now we're ready to go. So I know that that looks like a lot of basil, but it's really not. And you'll see in a moment, we're gonna stuff this in to the food processor. And you know, I'll get maybe not quite half of it in, just to get it started, and maybe about half of it. So you just kind of stuff it in. Yeah, that's about half of it. And now we're going to, and of course you got to be very careful when you're sticking your fingers in a food processor. We're going to give it a buzz, not too much, because the problem if you run it too hard and too much in the food processor, the basil, it's the heat from it starts to cook it a little bit, and you lose some of the flavor. So you don't want to do too much of that. So we'll just stuff that down a little, and we're gonna put the rest of it in here. You see, it looked like a lot of basil. But it's incredible how once you start chopping this stuff up, it's not as much as you think. So we're going to give that a little. I run it on both speeds. That's the lower speed. Again, you don't want to do too much, and you have to. There's some stuff that gets kind of trapped up there at the top, and you have to stuff it in. So now I'm going to pour some oil in it just to give it a little weight, and whatever's left on the top there is going to go on down where we want it to go, and that oil will give it more of the consistency that we want. And I'll take a look at that now. So that's really what you want your pesto to look like, more or less. Now we're going to add this delicious pecorino cheese, and I'll just put that in there. How much do I put in? Just enough. Maybe not going to put it all in, because we're always going to use some when we serve the pesto later. I like to put a little more oil. You got to use a lot of olive oil to make this right. Otherwise it'll be too dry. And so there it is. And I'm going to go ahead and process that. See, not too much. It doesn't take much. And you see the consistency of it now. It's looking pretty good. Oh yeah. It's just missing one last final ingredient. Lemon. Now, as I said earlier, not everybody uses lemon in their pesto, but I do, and I got this recipe from a couple of Italian recipes from the Amalfi region, which is Sorrento, and that area, which is where lemons come from. And this adds just the right tang, I guess you would call it, to the pesto. And I like to put maybe about a half a lemon. You gotta try to avoid those seeds. If it's a big lemon, maybe not the whole thing. You don't want to put too much, but just about half of an ordinary size lemon. This is a pretty big one. And we'll go ahead and process that. And let's get a look at that now. You see how nice and beautiful green that is? And the taste is unbelievable. Let's see. Let's see what you think. Good stuff.
Delicious.
Good stuff. All right, so now it's time to put the bucatini in, and we're just going to, you want to make sure that the water is really boiling hard, because as soon as you put it in, it's not going to be boiling so hard right away. And again, I'm making for 4 people here, so I put about 1.5 of these, which is 24 ounces. And it may seem like a lot, but when you taste how delicious this pesto is, believe me, it's not too much. So again, do not never ever put olive oil in the pot. You'll ruin the pasta. The sauce won't stick to it. Just make sure you give it a little stir every 2-3 minutes. Give it a stir. It won't stick to itself, believe me. So the other thing is, you want to make sure that you keep a cup handy right by the pot. And the reason for this is because at the end we're going to take a little bit of pasta water, and that's something you want to pour over the sauce because it helps the sauce to stick to the pasta, that starchy water. When it comes to wine, of course, drink moderately, but it's part of the food. That's very Italian. Just a glass, maybe 2, and it really complements the food. A good, strong, full-bodied red wine is what you want for pesto. Here's one option. It's called Madiran. It is from France. Some people might say Madiran. Has a lot of tannin in it. It's very good. Here's a Bordeaux. Bordeaux's good, also from France. But this is my wife and I's go-to wine, especially for pesto, Cannonau di Sardegna. And this wine, people that live in Sardinia are known to drink this wine, and there literally are more people in Sardinia that have lived to be over 100 than anywhere else in the world. And a lot of people think that it's because of this wine. It's the healthiest wine in the world, and it tastes amazing with that pecorino cheese, which comes from cows from Sardinia also. Or excuse me, not cows, sheep from Sardinia. The other wine where people tend to live to be over 100 is this Madiran from France. They have tons of people that live to be over 100 there also. So we're going to go with the Cannonau tonight. So you want to cook the pasta for about 7 or 8 minutes, and just every pasta is a little different, but the main thing is you want to make sure that it's al dente, meaning it's, it's still a little firm. You don't want your pasta to be mushy. That's just gross, and you'll ruin it if you do that. So don't overcook it. Al dente is meaning it's, it's still a little firm. You don't want your pasta to be mushy. That's just gross, and you'll ruin it if you do that. So don't overcook it. All right, so what I like to do, because nobody likes to do too many dishes, I use the same pot that I cooked the pasta in to serve it. Put just a little olive oil down in the bottom so nothing sticks, and of course it's off the flame now. And you notice that none of the pasta stuck to it, so there's no need to put olive oil in. Now we're going to dump the pasta in there. And now for the fun part. We're going to get this pesto sauce, which has been sitting here saying, "Eat me, eat me, eat me." It's calling our name. And we're just going to get a little spoon, and you just dump it right on top of the pasta. You know, there's a lot of different ways to do this. There's some fancy ways where people make a nice little pasta hill and twirl it, and they serve it that way in restaurants and all. Now, we're at home. We're not going to bother with all that stuff, and we're just going to put it in there, and once it's in that pot, I'm going to pour a little bit of the starchy water that I held back because it's going to help this to stick real nice, and it's just time to just mix it up. Look at that. Look how beautiful.
Dad's pesto.
Mwah. I love my dad's pesto. It's so good.
What do you think of Dad's pesto?
Now I'm going to put this pasta on this leather pad that I have here because obviously the pot is still hot. We don't want to burn our tablecloth or anything like that. But come on over here and get a good shot of this. Look how beautiful. Look how green and pretty that is. And it's ready to eat.
Oh my God, I got
And now for the fun part. We're going to eat the pasta. Oh yeah.
All gone. We ate all of our pesto. It was really good. I ate all mine. Satisfaction. Satisfaction. Oh my gosh. That concludes our night. Concludes our Italian night. Good night, everybody.
Can you send that?